This is Virginia Roots, a journey through traditional crafts, where we visit artists and craftspeople all over the Commonwealth to learn more about how they're keeping traditions alive through their art. Our first stop is Colonial Williamsburg in Hampton Roads, where we'll learn how metalworkers were an important part of the economy and culture of early Virginia, and how they continue to practice the arts of silversmithing and engraving. The art museums of Colonial Williamsburg are home to some of the finest collections of colonial silver and engraving in the world.
Going back to at least 600 BC, silver was considered a precious metal, and around that time period, it actually became money. So by the time we get to the American colonial period, silver is money. Silver had a secondary value because it could be crafted into very useful and beautiful things that would not only be a store of wealth, but they would also be a show of one's status.
So when it comes to silver and gold, we're smiths, which means we hammer things into shape. So we're not pouring it into a mold and out pops a spoon or what have you. We're going to take your money, your old silverware, your beat up jewelry, but it's usually money, and we're going to weigh it for its value on scales. We're going to melt it down. We're going to hammer it out into the thing. And so you've got this beautiful new thing that's actually made out of money. So one of the things that I do in the shop is I am what we call a chaser or an embosser, which means that I take these tools that are kind of like little special hammers, and I hold them against the metal and I chase them, I hammer them with the hammer, and I am shaping, I'm kind of drawing in 3D on this metal, right? Getting it to the shape that we need.
We've learned that owning engraved silver was a way to show off wealth and status, and silver was often engraved with a person's initials or family crest. So when the silversmith is finished, they might send it to an engraver, so words or pictures could be inscribed into it.
Engraving's kind of an afterthought, I think. We mostly think about the object. You know, if you've bought an incredible sterling silver tea set or a set of pewter spoons, that tends to be the focus. The engraving is sort of the great add-on. And again, you know, really making it so that the object has some identity to it, that somebody knows who it belongs to. What is generally today called a graver, in the 18th century might have been called a burin. That's a very sharp piece of steel, small wooden handle that's held in the palm of the hand, and that tool is gently pushed through to carve away small bits of material. If you kind of think of it, it's kind of like woodworking or carving in wood. It's just done on a really minuscule scale. So if you think about your baby cups that you might get today, or spoons and flatware that you want your monogram on, it's a way to not only decorate those kinds of items, but it's also there to identify objects. So kind of think of it, it potentially becomes a security system.
But engravers do more than just make marks on objects. Engraving on copper also made it possible to share copies of maps and pictures on printed paper, and helped actors and other famous people and places become even more famous.
We take it for granted that there's so many, we can just on our phone, we can carry around images of people, but at this time you had to really seek those things out. So before photography, the only way to reproduce an image like a painting or a drawing was to make an engraving. In the 18th century, this is when the skills of printmakers, the demand for images really increased, and you start to see images like the ones behind me. And in this way, you could make multiple copies of an image, and then those copies could be sent all around the world.
The process of engraving a copper plate is the same as for cups and trays, but often with even finer lines.
If you kind of think of it, it's kind of like woodworking or carving in wood. It's just done on a really minuscule scale. So we're not gouging terribly heavy. We're taking long, thin slivers of metal out. So once that plate is complete, like the plate I've got here, once that's finished, it would then be contracted to a printer. And what they're going to do is flood those carved lines that we've just engraved with ink. They're going to gently wipe the top of that plate clean, putting paper over top and running it through a black and white image is what is going to be the result.
We visit Studio 2-3 in Richmond to see how printmaking is still alive and well in today's modern world.
In the shops that we have here, we have technology that really goes back to essentially the same technology you would see in a place like Colonial Williamsburg. We can print engravings, but printmaking has continued to change. So we have presses from the 30s, 60s, 80s, 90s, so just the whole sort of progression. Printmaking tends to be equipment that is in some way no longer commercially viable. Then it gets cheap enough that artists buy it and start using it for other purposes. So usually as something dies for commercial viability, it gets picked up by artists and gets folded into the umbrella of printmaking. And all of these forms of printmaking, as faster and more automated and more mechanized forms of printmaking get created, they kind of stick around, but they become a niche. You know what I mean? So there's still people in the city of Richmond doing letterpress commercially. There's still people in the city of Richmond doing offset lithography. Printmaking has become more automated, more computerized, and faster. But all of the other forms kind of linger around. They never fully go away. There's something sort of fundamentally countercultural about the slowness of printmaking, and that's why a lot of us end up here. Some good advice would be get on YouTube and just do it at home with cheap materials. It's possible, yeah.